Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. For tonight's episode, I figured that I should meet my requirement of 1 episode of What to Watch Wednesdays per quarter dedicated to animated movies. Where did this requirement come from? I made it up. So, going off of that requirement, I figured tonight would be a really good chance to talk about something that I've been wanting to talk about here on the show for at least a little bit of time. And that is 3 movies by the legendary Japanese animation giant, Studio Ghibli. If I'm being completely honest, I've been familiar with Studio Ghibli for a very long time, and it felt like a natural pick that I would have to talk about eventually if I was to really kind of sell the show in terms of having some form of credibility. Because everybody knows about Studio Ghibli. If you haven't heard about Studio Ghibli, you've heard about one of their movies before. Some of their more well-known ones would probably be things like My Neighbor Totoro, Spirited Away, Kiki's Delivery Service, Howl's Moving Castle. And while all of those are great, I figured because everybody's heard of it, it would make sense to talk about a couple that not everybody mentions in the same breath as the ones that I just mentioned, but at least start off with the one that everybody would probably knows. Which means that our watch list tonight is going to start off with Spirited Away from 2001, followed up by Castle in the Sky from 1986, and closing out with Porco Rosso from 1992. If I'm being honest, because I don't sound like I have a lot of energy in my voice, I wanted to clarify that tonight's episode is kind of a therapeutic, relaxing episode for me. I don't really want to be standing here yelling about movies all the time. I'm just going to be standing here talking about movies. So hopefully you all will get a really big kick out of it, or get some form of enjoyment of me just kind of being very chilled and laid back tonight. Although it isn't very chilled in the station itself, it's kind of hot in here, but that's not really all that important. When we come back from the break, we'll jump into Spirited Away, so stick around for that. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Spirited Away from 2001, available to watch now on Max. For the basic plot summary of Spirited Away, we follow Chihiro, a young Japanese girl who is moving to a new town. Chihiro is quite literally spirited away, into the spirit realm, where she finds all sorts of crazy and whimsical characters. Now that she has been separated from her parents and has been spirited away all on her own, she must find a way back to the real world, with the help of these crazy and whimsical characters. Now, here's one thing I should have mentioned in the intro to this show, but I'll bring it up right now just to kind of clarify. The 3 movies we're talking about tonight are all directed and written by the director and writer Hayao Miyazaki, who is pretty much the most well-known director to come out of Studio Ghibli. He's one of the head honchos. He's one of the co-founders of the company, and his specific style has been examined, critiqued, analyzed to absolute heck and back. So keep in mind that this was an interesting introduction to the world of Miyazaki when I first watched it. Keep in mind that Spirited Away was the first, it may have been the first one. It was either that or Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind. I am almost positive it could have been Nausicaa first. But what I do know is that Spirited Away is when I started paying attention to the work of Miyazaki. It's when I started paying attention to the work of Studio Ghibli as a whole. It's the one that kind of stood out to me, and it's the kind of real introduction to the style of Miyazaki's work. So keep that in mind when I tell you that Spirited Away is both a really good movie and a really scary movie. Again, I've mentioned that there's whimsical characters. There's fun little adventurous, and there's kind of this funny little joke about how Chihiro is quite literally spirited away. I meant to say Chihiro, but it came out Chihiro. Whatever. The point is, from that description, you wouldn't think it'd be all that scary. Sure, she's separated from her parents, but she can handle herself. If you stop watching this movie while you're watching it, by that I mean if you pause this movie while you are watching it in any capacity, you will stop and realize that this is very scary. This isn't full of whimsy. This isn't full of childlike wonder that you would think it would be. It's not exactly the happiest time for a young girl because she's been trying to move to a new town, having to get accustomed to going to a new school, being away from her friends, and having to deal with her parents just kind of going off there because reasons. I don't even remember the exact reason that they're moving, but they're just moving to a new town for whatever reason. And now she finds herself in a crazy and fantastical place that, when I say whimsical, keep in mind that makes it very fun and eye-catching and entertaining to watch. It also means it doesn't make a lot of sense. Keep that in mind, that if you were to pause this movie like I did when watching it, as an adult, you stop and go, this is actually really horrifying. But when you're a kid being first introduced and first waking up to the real truth that Miyazaki is such a masterful director and a masterful storyteller, you don't really stop and realize how scary it is. You stop and go, this is really weird. This is interesting. This is unlike anything I've ever seen before. As an adult, you stop and realize, what is going on? I feel so bad. But that's a strength and a weakness here. And if anything, it's not really much of a weakness. It's honestly a strength because keep about it in mind. I don't know what I'm trying to say with words right now, but keep this in mind. If you go to a movie theater to watch a movie, you're not exactly going to pause part of the way through. So in its original form of watching this on a big screen, it doesn't pause, so you can't really stop and think about how horrifying it all is. That's a strength. That works in the movie's favor. A lot of other things work in the favor of the movie Spirited Away. Things like the little whimsical characters that I've been talking about but haven't really called out by name. We have things like No Face, which is kind of obvious from the name, but it's a spirit with seemingly no face and just a mask and a very tall and shadowy figure, who's very well known and very well recognized. If you don't know anything about Studio Ghibli by the name or anything about Spirited Away by the name, well, I'd recommend looking up a picture of No Face and you will know exactly what I'm talking about, or you will go, I have seen that at least somewhere before. Alongside that, we have the character of Haku, who so many things about him are interesting that are unfortunately spoilers for the movie Spirited Away, so I cannot get into any of them. But we also have Kamaji, a crazy old man who has multiple arms and is kind of like a spider. I find him really fun because he's just old and he's there. But he does end up doing something, which is again a bit of a spoiler, so I'd still recommend watching the movie to understand all the significance of him. We have something like Lin, who is very well acted and just kind of there to support or go against Chihiro at specific moments. The point I'm getting at is, even though I haven't mentioned it with all of them, keep in mind that the best thing you can do with side characters is have them do something. You can have them contribute to the story. You can have them contribute in some way. And again, I think I've made that clear by saying that Haku and Kamaji have something to do with the story when I can't talk about them too extensively without spoiling the movie. And that does go for No Face as well. I'd say Lin is the only one that I can talk about extensively without spoiling it. And even then, there's not much to say. She's just a really good supporting character. When I mean there's nothing to say, I mean there's nothing bad to say. And that really gets me to my final point surrounding Spirited Away. There isn't much that I could say that's good about Spirited Away that everybody else hasn't already said. I feel like the only unique thing I've said during this entire review that I harped on for pretty long is the fact that it's so scary when you pause and think about it. But the best thing about Spirited Away is that you don't really want to pause and think about it. You want to let it run all the way through and just kind of exist with it. So that's not really a problem, because there's not much that's that Spirited Away does wrong. There's barely anything that the movie does wrong. There are nitpicks, but overall the movie's just really good. I can't recommend it enough. That's all I really have to say about it, for now at least. And with all that being said, we're going to go on to our first music break, or our second music break, one of the two. And when we come back, we'll jump into Castle in the Sky. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Castle in the Sky from 1986, available to watch now on Max. For the basic plot summary of Castle in the Sky, we follow Pazu, a young orphan boy, who meets Sheeta, a girl who falls from the sky. Their meeting begins an action-packed adventure to find Laputa, the Castle in the Sky, which is the name of the movie. In fact, it's normally called Laputa, Castle in the Sky. At any rate, all of this adventuring ends up with Pazu and Sheeta being chased down by people like the government, a man named Colonel Muska, and sky pirates. Because of course, they are trying to find a castle in the sky after all. Flying pirates feels like the least out of place thing. If anything, why are the military and the Colonel Muska following them? Let's just have it be a bunch of sky pirates. That's not the real point. Let's get on to the real point. Castle in the Sky. What can I say about it? Well, I can say this. Laputa Castle in the Sky, or just Castle in the Sky. I'll call it Castle in the Sky. I will say that whatever you call it, I can call it my arbitrary, personal favorite pick of Miyazaki's movies that I've seen. There is that caveat that it's of the movies of his that I have seen, but at the same time, it's the favorite out of those that I've watched. Let me back up a little bit and also say that it comes with the caveat that I just said, quote unquote, arbitrary. I called it an arbitrary pick. Why? Because I just went on and on about how Spirited Away is so very good. Let me tell you, that is not an isolated incident. There are a lot of good Studio Ghibli movies. Pretty much any one of them that you watch is going to be good. I don't even have to say that as an opinion. It's pretty well known that a lot of these movies are very good. They are very good, technically speaking, from the choice of animation style, the way it's animated, just the overall look and feel of the movies. They're all very good. So keep in mind that it's kind of a competition, but also arbitrary, to pick your favorite. Whenever I talk to people about what their favorite Studio Ghibli movie is, sometimes they'll say, oh, it's Kiki's Delivery Service because XYZ, or oh, it's Princess Mononoke because XYZ, or oh, it's Howl's Moving Castle because XYZ. And you can never really argue with them. You don't really want to argue with them, because why would you? There's no real reason to argue over which one is the best. You kind of just exchange which one is your favorite and get on with your life. Oh, if all film discussion was exactly like that. But since I've said that everybody tends to go XYZ, let me explain to you now why Castle in the Sky is my favorite out of the movies by Studio Ghibli and Hayao Miyazaki that I have seen. First off, we have the Sky Pirates. Despite the fact that there aren't a bunch of them, there is enough of them. There is the Dola Gang, the main Sky Pirates, named after Dola, a old lady with pink ponytails, or pigtails, or long pink hair. I don't know hair terms. The point is, this woman named Dola has like 5 sons and a couple assistants and her husband, who all run this dingy little pirate ship in the sky. And it's hilarious because all of her sons are really stupid and they're all teaming up with their mother to be sky pirates. What about that idea doesn't sound hilarious? I think everything about it sounds really hilarious, especially the part where she yells at them, all for one and all for mom. Or one for all and all for mom, whatever the saying is. She's in charge of her idiot sons as they're trying to be sky pirates. Alongside that, we have the villain of the movie. We have Muska, who in the English dub, of this movie, at least the Disney-approved English dub of this movie, is voiced by the legendary Mark Hamill. Yes, Luke Skywalker plays an anime villain, and it is awesome because it is Mark Hamill, but it is also an actually compelling character. I found it interesting that his big reveal near the end of the movie was actually really important to the context of the story. You rewatch the movie through an entirely different light after you see that ending twist. Of course, a lot of ending twists are that way, but this one in particular has always stuck out to me. I've remembered it for a very long time. I will also say that there are some small elements about Castle in the Sky that I really like. We've got big robots, okay? We've got flying airships, right? We've got a fun mechanic or mining town that Pazu lives in. And he's well known among the community because he is an orphan, but he's very strong and he works well and he's very diligent. And it takes up a good portion of the first part of the movie. And I feel like it would be a disservice to not mention that setting because I really like it. We also have a very steampunk aesthetic to go alongside that fun little mining town. We have steampunk airships that fly in the sky. We've got the fantastical element of the castle in the sky itself, of Laputa, of something that you might see eventually, but is hinted at beforehand. We've also got a great musical score. We've got a really fun aesthetic. We've got great colors. We've got so many good things. Despite that, there are some rough patches here and there. There's some choppy animation. There's some weird choices with the dubbing. There's some editing. It doesn't look perfect, doesn't hold up to the perfection level of Spirited Away. I will give you that. What I will not give you is room to debate me on this. And here is the main reason that Castle in the Sky is my favorite. Oh, there's a main reason, you may be asking. Because whoa, excuse me. Good heavens. I may have just spent a long time talking about all of the good things having to do with Castle in the Sky, but none of them are my favorite thing about Castle in the Sky. The biggest thing, the number one standout feature in Castle of the Sky that elevates it over nearly every Miyazaki movie I have seen up till this point is the relationship between the two main characters that I mentioned all the way at the start when talking about the plot summary. Just to give you a refresher, we have Pazu, a young boy who's a mechanic, he's an orphan, and he works in a mining town, lives on his own. About 13 years old from what I've read. And then we have Sheeta, a girl who falls from the sky, who is somehow connected to the castle of Laputa. When I say she falls from the sky, I mean she quite literally floats down, and she has this little necklace that's glowing, and it's like, whoa, is this magic? It might be magic. She's being chased by federal agents, the military, and pirates, all because of that necklace. Despite those elements surrounding them, those aren't the important parts. There's one important part. And that is the relationship between Pazu and Sheeta. I would lie and say that it's not a good relationship. I would lie and say it's the worst part of the movie. That would be probably the best way to convince myself that I am living in a perpetual state of opposite day. Because I love everything about Pazu and Sheeta's relationship. It works. It works almost immediately from the get-go in terms of them starting a friendship. And as it goes on, sure, they go through conflict, but it mimics the conflict of the story really well. Their relationship is really good. I love everything about it. It gives me life. It gives me purpose and meaning in my sad, cold existence sometimes. And watching it again as an adult, I am surprised to say that I like it even more than when I first watched it as a child. Keep that in mind when you go into Castle in the Sky. It might seem arbitrary, but if I'm being honest, it ain't all that arbitrary when it's the core reason I love the movie so much. So with all that being said, that was Castle in the Sky. We're going to go to our next music break, and when we come back, we'll jump into Porco Rosso. Your Movie Central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Porco Rosso from 1992, available to watch now on Max. For the basic plot summary of Porco Rosso, it is set in 1930s Italy as a group of seaplane pirates chased after a mysterious, ex-pilot named Porco Rosso. Now, here's one thing I should mention. The movie is named after the main character, Porco Rosso. Now, what does the name Porco Rosso mean? You may be asking, does that have a significance at all? Yes, it does. As a matter of fact, Porco Rosso, when translating from Italian, means red pig. And as a matter of fact, Porco Rosso flies a red plane. It's kind of like a Red Baron situation, right? So why is it called a pig, though? Is there any significance to that? Funny you mentioned that. You could say kind of. You could also say yes. You could also say absolutely. You could also say, well, what do you think? Here's what you should be thinking if you're not already thinking it. Porco Rosso, the character, is a pig. He's a man-sized pig. He's an anthropomorphic pig. He talks and he walks on his hind legs. He's shaped like a rather portly gentleman, but he's a pig. He's got a pig snout and little mustaches, and that's what you need to know about Porco Rosso. He is a pig. Keep in mind, you may be thinking, man, he's emphasizing that he's a pig a lot. That's because Porco Rosso, the character, does not stop acknowledging the fact that he's a pig. He keeps going, I'm a pig. I don't need to wash up after myself. I'm a pig. I'm not about glory or honor. I'm about being a pig. He does legitimately say that part about it not being about his honor. He just is a pig. So it's funny from that perspective. You may be asking, okay, cool. So he's a pig. How did he become a pig? And why is he a pig? And to that I'd say, you're asking the wrong darn questions. Don't worry about that. I don't think, to my memory, they even address why he is a pig. They just they say it was a curse, maybe, and move on with him just being a pig. Okay, so I feel like I should have brought this up earlier, but like, now it feels like the best time, since I've already said it like 40 times, might as well add it and make it about 50. In Spirited Away, when I said that Chihiro's parents left her and she's kind of left in the spirit world on her own, I wasn't telling the full truth there. With the way that movie worked, essentially what happens is she and her family take a detour on the way to their new house, and they go into this abandoned carnival grounds. These abandoned carnival grounds, right? And her parents go by, and they find some fresh food, and they start eating. Chihiro walks off. Then it turns night, and it becomes the spirit world in this carnival. And she walks back to her parents and finds that they've been turned into pigs. This is why I'm bringing this up now, because this is the second movie of the night where there are pigs as a major plot point. Only the difference is that with Porco Rosso, the main character is the pig, rather than the main character's parents. So isn't that fun? Is that connected at all? Probably, but I'm not going to sit here and think too much about pigs. I'm just going to keep saying it because I really like saying the word pig, if I'm being completely honest. That's half the reason I've said it as many times as I have. Moving on, because I am not an expert in terms of analyzing movies. I like to think of myself, in my opinion, to be quite good at analyzing them, but I'm not exactly... I like to think of it in terms of being more about... I like to think of myself as being better at being a humorous reviewer than a serious one at certain points. And when it comes to Porco Rosso, when the main character is a pig, there's only a certain amount of serious I can get with it before I start laughing, and I can't take it seriously anymore. And I mean, part of that is the core idea, but part of it is also up to the movie itself, and part of that is up to the fact that I like laughing. So it's kind of all of our faults at the same time. Here's the point. If I was to be honest with you, I do think that there is some message inside of Porco Rosso. Not buried at all, but it's in there, for sure, if you look at it. there is some core geopolitical message because it is set in 1930s Italy. If I had to guess, because there is quite... If I had to guess, I say, when I know it for a matter of fact, there is a line in this movie that kind of confirms this message in it. I'm going to backtrack and say right now that there is a core message in Porco Rosso. It is anti-Italian fascist. Because, and I quote, there is a point in this movie where Porco Rosso directly says to a friend of his, "I'd rather be a pig than a fascist." If that doesn't spell it out, I don't know what will. He'd rather be a pig than a fascist. And you know what, Porco Rosso? I kind of would prefer that you be a pig rather than a fascist, because it means I get to say the word pig 50 million times. Keep in mind that what makes me laugh even more than that, rather than I've already laughed enough at him being a pig. Now, let me clarify. There's a second factor in this that makes it a lot funnier. Here's the thing. In the English dub of Porco Rosso is played by a very well-known actor. Who do you think they got to voice the anthropomorphic pig, who is human-sized and walks on his hind legs and talks? That's right, Michael Keaton. They got Michael Keaton to voice the pig. The Italian airplane pilot pig is voiced by Michael Keaton, and he's just going, "I'd rather be a pig than a fascist." I don't know what about that is not funny. Everything about that is so funny, and everything about the movie in conjunction is kind of funny. There's a lot of scenes in this movie that are centered around dogfights, because keep in mind, Porco Rosso is a pilot. You wouldn't tell because he's a pig. But at the same time, there's a lot of dogfights in this movie that are very fun and exciting, and have such whimsical music that you kind of forget you're watching two people try to shoot each other down in a plane. And there's a lot of those scenes, so you kind of forget that a lot. Alongside of that, you have a lot of interesting existential questions. You may think that the pig has survivor's guilt, but don't worry, the whimsical music and the fact that he's a pig kind of distract you from that point. I may sound kind of angry, and I'm not at all. I'm a bit hysterical right now because I've said pig so many times that I think my brain is kind of swirling around and around and around. So with all that being said, I think now is a really good time to just call the show for tonight. Thank you all for tuning in to What to Watch Wednesdays here on Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. I will be back here on 88.1 The Burg next Wednesday from 8 to 9 p.m. for another episode of What to Watch Wednesdays. I will also be back this Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. for What to Watch Weekends, where I will be talking about these Studio Ghibli movies and maybe a couple others. I'd highly recommend tuning in if you want to figure out what those will be. Alongside that, if you want to follow along with What to Watch Wednesdays and What to Watch Weekends, follow the What to Watch Wednesdays Instagram account or YouTube channel at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, on both platforms. And again, I will be back next Wednesday where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.